Hey, RJ. Hey, everybody. Oh, wait. Hello, everybody. All right, so here we go. All right, so we're gonna get started right away here since we do have some people in here. So tonight, got a couple articles to go over. The first being from Critical Blast. RJ did a cover the other day, or did a story the other day on Marvel apparently telling retailers, why do you need to make profit? We're going to be looking at that article. Also, we're going to be looking at an article from Bounding into, or not Bounding, I'm sorry, not Bounding into Comics, but Bleeding Fool. Let me just double check that one. Another comics related article, obviously. Let me just remind myself of that. Oh yeah, so there's a convention that's celebrating 22 years of connecting Black comic creators with fans. So we'll be looking at that as well. We just plus, of course, later on, the wrestling wrap up, this day in each history, and the like. So with all that, and since we do have some people in here, RJ, if you're in the chat, did you happen to get my message earlier about the fact that you actually have a stream scheduled for a week from Thursday at 10 a.m. I didn't know if you realized that or not. Just trying to give you a heads up on that so you could so you could so you can fix that. Anyways, let's see about here. There we go. All right. Alrighty then. So, anyways, without any further ado, let me just check one more thing here, and then we will be ready to go. All right. All right. So, anyways, why don't we go ahead and get started with the articles then? Here's the first one. All right. So, this is an article that RJ did, in which let's Marvel the comic retailers. Why should you make a profit? Let's take a look at this. Submitted by R.J. Carter on Friday, the 26th, 22, 25. So I'm guessing that if that's Central Time, that'd be like 20, so about 8:25 my time, 10:25 RJ's time, if I'm understanding that correctly. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started here with this. All right, so bluntly, the discount being offered. Wait, okay. There's a bit more up here than I thought. Okay, so here we go. Let's start up here, where I think it's technically supposed to start. If you've been collecting comics for more than a few weeks, you're already aware of the fashion of multiple covers for the same comic. These variants may come in a number of varieties, but a popular version is the eye-catching foil variant cover. In the May solicitation, comics retailers were sent some very unwelcome news regarding the fall variants for Incredible Hulk number 181, facsimile edition, Moon Knight, City of the Dead number 1, and Star Wars Dark Droids number 1. A solicitation for these July 2023 shipments stated, quote, please be aware that Marvel's new foil variant cover program will bear different shorter discounts than normal due to the significantly higher manufacturing cost for foil covers, unquote. Well, is it that the cost of the foil covers is increased, or is it more likely that they're not selling as many books because of some of the material they're putting in the books? I would garner they're losing money for that, not because of the foil covers, but that's just my point of view. RJ, I'm sure. And as always, guys, of course, if you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here. Also, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. All right, so with that, let's see now. All right, so bluntly, the discount being offered is zero, nada, which means the $3.99 and $4.99 SRP, you see stamped on each cover of Incredible Hulk and Moon Knight, respectively, is exactly what the retailers are paying for the books, with the expectation that they will sell them for Marvel for absolutely no profit at all. Oh, isn't that just dandy? Marvel, in parentheses here, Marvel very generously offers a discount of 16% off of $5.99 Dark Droids book, allowing retailers to buy it for $5.03 and make a tidy 96-cent profit. Woohoo! Oh boy. Oh boy, that doesn't sound right. 96 cents a profit for just those books that are $5.99. Great. Yippee! Hmm. As we continue on here, let's see. Traditionally, the discounted rate offered to retailers is between 40 and 50% off the suggested retail price. A structure similar to all other booksellers. If the retailer sells the books at their suggested retail price, they don't just make no money. It actually costs them money because they also had to pay the shipping charges to get the books into the store in a time where comics aren't exactly burning up their sales charts. Nope, and we've seen plenty of examples of this, mind you. As I was saying earlier, it's not. I don't really think that it's the foil cover variants that are really the problem. I think it's the fact the material they're putting into the books is the problem. Let's see. Throwing an insult like this to retailers is an extremely antagonistic move on the part of the publishing industry. Perhaps if the cost to produce a book with bells and whistles is too much to bear, it might be time to think about dropping the bells and whistles and focusing on telling a good story. Yeah, I would say that most people would agree with that statement right there. So, um, and thank you for the tweet. Hopefully we can get some more people in here. See this. So basically, yeah, that's kind of a poopy move to do. Again, it's kind of funny because we've been talking about, for I'm going to use another term. I know the term most of you would be using, but I'm going to use a slightly different term. We've been talking about poopy things that people do to each other the last couple of days. Today we're talking about how retailers are getting pooped on by Marvel, um, by basically just discontinuing a discount from the sounds of it. Yesterday we talked about how there's a rumor going around about Walt Disney where they're supposedly hiring on quote unquote Walt Disney legends, promising them roles just to keep them quiet about to keep them from being able to say anything about current projects. We covered that article from Bounding in the Comics yesterday. For those of you who missed it, but yeah, we've seen how certain entities, certain corporations, certain entities just seem to be being real poopy to people. You know, Disney trying to silence people from criticizing their current projects, to now Marvel basically pooping on retailers to cover to cover the loss that they're feeling for the fact that they're not putting out good stories. So, RJ, if you're in there, if you have anything more you want to say on this, feel free to do so, man. You're the one who covered this story, so what am I going to say now? So we'll get to the next story in a moment here. Oh, there's JR. Hail Xenu, Xena, RJ, and Mike. Hey, RJ, JR. Again, if you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and we will try to I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the next article. Which will be which caught my attention a few moments ago here. From Bleeding Fool. Let's see. Anyways. All right. So, anyways, let's get to this next article then. Well, maybe that did have an effect then. Huh. Not sure if it was, because it wasn't going up anymore. So. All right. There we go. All right. All right. So, anyways, let's get to this next article here. Um, all right. Convention celebrates 22 years of connecting Black comic creators with fans. Article by Avi Green published earlier today. Philadelphia Inquirer covered the ECBACC held at Temple University. In parentheses, my own parents were graduates of that facility, which spotlights many Black and African American contributions to comicdom. Lynn Marie Finley became fascinated by comic book heroes when she was young. Luke Cage and Misty Knight, two of Marvel's first Black superheroes that came after Black Panther in the 70s, first grabbed her attention. But when Finley, now 47, first saw Storm from the X-Men comics with her black skin and silver hair, it was quote unquote striking. When Finley came from her home in Maryland to Philadelphia last weekend for the 22nd annual East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, there was only one character for her to dress up as. Well, they didn't throw her in there just for diversity's sake, she said, referencing Storm's critical role in one of X-Men's most successful or one of Marvel's most successful franchises. Quote, they had some plans for her, unquote, in brackets there, the for her part. ECBACC, or the East Coast Black Artists Comics Convention, Black Age of Comics Convention, is an annual gathering in Philadelphia for creators and fans of Black comic books and fantasy, bringing in people from across the country. Finley is a regular here, taking in comic book vendors, panel discussions, and cosplay competitions each year with everyone else. Okay, so let's see if anybody's saying anything more. Nope, I guess not. Um, Noticing she dressed in one of the hottest designs for Storm's costume, that should make clear somebody's got no issue with the concept of sex appeal as artists like Dave Corcoran applied to Aurora Monroe during the Bronze Age. It's a shame, however, that today's comics proper aren't worth the cover price. Black writers mustn't forget accomplishments of their predecessors. In brackets, you get to see the images that look like us. A lot of other cons, you don't see a lot of black art and black characters, unquote, Finley said. Quote, you get to find something a little different and something that looks like you, unquote, centering comics, comic creators. In 1988, as Yumi Odom first arrived in Philadelphia, he noticed that the comic book creator and fan community here were not very connected. Quote, I don't think that, in brackets, people knew they had that many creators in this one city, unquote, she said. Odom has been a comic book fan since he was a boy in New York. His mother gave him several issues of X-Men, Fantastic Four, and other comics to read while he was hospitalized with an arm injury, and he's been dedicated to them ever since. He's a sort of comic book historian, pointing out how Philadelphia was home to the first comic book to be created by and featuring all black people, a single issue um, all Negro comics in 1947. Now, mind you, just for those of you who might start screaming and yelling up in arms, this is the title of the book back then. That's all I'm doing. Just that was printed here. So let's not start a race right just because I had acknowledge that. So, anyways, as we continue on here, and then here's I guess this is the cover to it right here. It's of course, some very negative stereotypes, unfortunately. Um, a decade after completing his master's thesis on Black comics at Temple, Odom started ECBACC in 2002, with a few colleagues aiming to continue building connections between Black comic creators and fans. He believes comics can be used to increase literacy in Black community. Well, yeah, that's always been a case. I've talked about I've talked about the movie, the TV made for TV movie, A Town Torn Apart, starring Michael Tucker and Jill Eikenberry. We talked about that on several occasions. That's another example of that. But where utilizing comics to increase literacy, and wants to help support the people who are writing and drawing those stories. Quote, this is both, in brackets, for the fan and the creator, unbracketed, but we center the creator. I think he meant to say we center on the creator. Most of the other, in brackets, conventions, the corporate ones, their focus is really making money, which is not a bad thing, but our focus is actually promoting the people who make the work, unquote, he said. To this guy's credit, he hints at exactly what's wrong with more corporate conventions, which explains why the San Diego Comic Con becomes more movie focused than comics focused. And come to think of it, why they're not worth paying money to anymore. Historical hits. Billy Graham reminds us diversity in comics is not new. I wonder which Billy Graham they're talking about. Is the preacher Billy Graham or the wrestler Billy Graham? I wonder what they're talking about with that. Or it could be somebody altogether different. But the following honestly overlooks what's wrong with another form of corporatism. He is proud of the people who have worked with and received EBA, I think it's really ECBACC awards. Let's see. We quote, we have folks who are now at Disney. They're at BET. They're all over the place. They're at Marvel and they're at DC in brackets comic as unparentheses, unquote. Here, based on how far the big two and Disney have fallen, I'm afraid I can't agree from a modern perspective that it's a wonderful thing anybody's working for them, since it's clear that they're doing nothing to defend the dignity of classic creations or what made them work, and much of the storytelling today lacks merit. And who knows how many contributors who attended ECBACC are even injecting wokeness into the stories they're working on for the majors. There's Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, Black Panther, and a black and white picture. See where we're at on time here. Hey, Rick. If you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, see everyone gets more friendly people in here, that'd be appreciated. Hi, all. Yep. And of course, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So with that, let me finish off this statement here. We're at 25 minutes, so maybe I will go back to bounding in the comments, see if we can find the story there. That's why an indie or maybe we'll look before we go back to bounding in the maybe I'll look at some of the other parts here. That's why an indie creator going to work for the big two today is nothing to be excited about or admire. If the terms are absurd and PC and only do a disfavor to the classic source material, and the assigned creator can't or won't do anything to make improvements, then what's the use of working for them nowadays? Yeah. What I think Avi's pointing out is I think you tend to have more creative freedom if you just stay independent and don't work for the big two. Not trying to be their cookie cutter type comics. Let's see. Let me. The first article, RJ's article, of course, went a little quicker than I thought it would. So, so let's see what else we can find in here. Let's see. Oh, here's an interesting article from a couple days ago. Take a look at this one here real quick, because we do have a little bit of time. And look at that, we have 5 people in here now. Yay! And if you guys haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, and seeing if we can get some more friendly people in here. Also, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to like and share the stream. Feel free to ask, comment and or ask questions. We'll try to answer them I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hail, Rick, what comics are you working on? Anything new? Anyways. All right, so parents objecting to wokeness in comics compared to book burners. Article by Avi Green, published back on Sunday, May 28th. The Bucks County Courier-Times published some apologia for woke comics and other such books. Another attempt to hypocritically compare parents objecting to literature normalizing LGBT propaganda in schools to the Wortham era moral panics and hysteria. In February 1955, a Girl Scout troop in Indiana, Pennsylvania, kept warm around a bonfire for the future, quote unquote, a comic book burning. The ceremony, targeting comics that refused a then new industry censorship code, displayed the troops' opposition to quote unquote obscene reading materials threatening to indoctrinate the nation's youth. Like more than a dozen other comic book burnings across the country over a decade prior, The smoldering fires were fueled by many things, primarily parental fear and stories about an alleged icon of fascism, Superman. The comic book industry had been booming through the later years of the Great Depression and into World War II. And we're seeing this. We are seeing this. And I'll be talking about that as over the next couple months here. A cheap form of entertainment and pro-war propaganda. While stories of Captain America winning first fistfights against Adolf Hitler helped drive the popularity of comic books at home and abroad, the visual medium of comics led to a public perception that they were children's books with no literary or artistic value, which is not entirely true. I mean, I would say that there is some literary value because if anything, from what we've read when we've read some of those older books, they do use language a lot more properly than we would today. Uh, oh, yeah. All right, we already looked at that. Okay, let's see. The rise of superhero comics in the late 1930s opened the door for crime and horror comics in the 1940s, prompting scrutiny by teachers and parents over stories of the macabre and supernatural. Granted, this is kind of the mix of the the very graphic illustrations they were using, and for a lot of Christians back then, feeling that the supernatural aspects were leading their kids down a path of blasphemy and apostasy and a lot of that. Spurned by anxieties that illustrated dime magazines would turn their children into criminals and sexual deviants, parents and lawmakers pressured a burgeoning comic book industry into self-regulation. And we saw this with the publication of Seduction of the Innocent from Frederick Worthen. For decades, a set of guidelines made a positive contribution to contemporary life, quote unquote, by censoring stories that undermined government institutions, disrespected family values, or even hinted at quote unquote illicit sex relations, threatening the quote unquote sanctity of marriage. While cultural changes eventually ended the Comics Code Authority of the 1950s and made book burnings and censorship taboo, the moral panic that created them is alive and well in a parental rights movement today that's sweeping the nation. Public school libraries are the new battleground for protecting children from quote unquote pornography or grooming by sexual predators, usually means restricting books about systemic racism, gender, sexuality, anything that one side considers woke political indoctrination. Who wrote this article? All right, I can't wait to see how. I mean, there it almost sounds like he's actually a library policy passed by the Central Bucks School District, the third largest in Pennsylvania, has become boilerplate policy language considered or adopted in smaller districts across the state. Readings of classic and contemporary titles tackling systemic racism, sexual assault, or LGBTQ issues are read out of context in school board meetings to push restrictive library policies as lawmakers across the country push parental rights legislation. Oh, okay, I see. This part of the article we're reading is actually from, I guess, the newspaper article. This isn't Avi speaking now. This is the newspaper article. Okay. I was kind of getting a little because I'm sure Avi was writing this, but no, this portion of the article was not Avi writing. It was it surprised me if he held these kind of positions. So I guess he's kind of showing us, you know, basically what how people are reporting the parental rights issues, giving us that perspective. Although not the sole focus of this new pro-censorship movement, comic books and long-form graphic novels are often singled out as subliterate picture books with no educational value for children. Now I guess we're back to okay. So now this, I guess now this is Avi speaking. The other one was the newspaper article speaking. See where this is going? So we're lectured that parents are entirely in the wrong here, and there's somehow nothing wrong with exposing younger children to issues like sexual violence and LGBTQ propaganda. While sexual abuse is obviously something students need to learn about and why it's negative and offensive, underage children cannot be expected to comprehend, and that's one more reason why anybody who's implying it's acceptable to teach underage children about this is truly in need of a psychologist. Besides, something else that's not addressed here is that men claiming to be transsexual have proven fully capable of sexual abuse themselves and don't belong in women's prisons or women's bathrooms, I would say. And then this, I guess, is back from the article. In the battle for the library, comic books might hold the most valuable lessons for all sides. Unfortunately, now this is Avi speaking again. Unfortunately, if it's possible for Hitler to write up a repulsive book like Mein Kampf, it's equally possible for a racist, sexist to concoct a comic that's quite a polar opposite of a lesson and more like indoctrination. That's what many National Socialist propaganda films were made for, too. And if memory serves, wasn't quote unquote Birth of a Nation a racist film? So what's the point here? I am finishing up remastering of Canadian Shield number 1, and when that's all done, we'll be working on Canadian Shield number 3 and coloring Snowdrift number 2 and Flame number 1 when I get pages coming in. And that's not to be confused with, of course, the Golden Age Flame character either, by the way, just let people know. Also, I am being paid to draw some. I think you meant to say someone else's comics. So, all right. So, in addition to blaming comics for the violent fights at the unnamed New York school, Wortham said the quote unquote ethical and moral confusion from comics were also responsible for at least 26 teen pregnancies. So this is from the news article. The nation's sons were corrupted by tales of glorified youth while its daughters were being quote seduced mentally long before they were seduced physically, unquote, Wortham said. Oh, what Wortham was arguing is that the girls were being made promiscuous by these comics, you know, before they acted on that promiscuity. Now here's Avi speaking again. Now, this is something quite weird to highlight, considering this being an era where daughters are being seduced mentally to desecrate their bodies for the sake of transsexual propaganda. And abortion is seen as fully acceptable by the left, which Wortham was part of, something that surely embarrasses many modern leftists, whether they admit it or not. Seriously, one could make a valid case. The whole notion 18 pregnancy and potential grandchildren were in the making is only a bad thing, is insulting to the intellect. If the columnist siding with LGBTQ propaganda, um, what's the use of bringing up this specific issue? It's decidedly contradictory. From the news, back to the news article here. Worthen also suggested in Seduction of the Innocent that Batman and his sidekick Robin were actually a gay couple, citing various scenes of the two characters at home in Bruce Wayne's mansion. Um, yes, and I know one of the common things that has been talked about is, basically seeing the two of them in bed together. Well, it is like a wish dream of two homosexuals living together. Sometimes they are shown on a couch, Bruce reclining and Dick sitting next to him, jacket off, collar open, and his hand on his friend's arm, unquote, Wortham wrote. During his testimony, Wortham more directly laid out the dangers of these, quote, homosexual fantasies in comic books. So, it's kind of funny because what they're saying, what I think Avi's getting at here, Wortham was part of the left or Wortham was part of the right at the time, okay, or would have been considered part of the left in terms of citing all this. He was actually saying that it was not okay for this stuff to be happening, and people would be. Anyways, quote, nobody would believe that you teach a boy homosexuality without introducing him to it, unquote, Wortham said. In other words, Wortham argued that comic books could turn children gay. It's important to note that being in a same-sex relationship was illegal until states slowly began repealing anti-gay laws in 1961. The Supreme Court didn't rule anti-sodomy laws as unconstitutional until 2003. Incremental cultural shifts like the gay rights movement would eventually reshape the CCA over decades, but its restrictions against illicit sexual relations, quote unquote, would have lingering effects on gay representation in mainstream comics. Marvel Comics debuted its first gay character, Northstar, in 1979, but the character's sexuality was left mostly to innuendo and rumors for more than a decade. Anyways, and we shall continue on here. As I may have noted a time or two before, while Wortham perceptions back in the day were a huge exaggeration, homosexual interactions today in mainstream literature are far more deliberate, and what he said ironically makes clear it's possible to indoctrinate youth into homosexuality. If that's the intention of the educator, why if only so many youths in Islamic regimes could be indoctrinated with the Quran, then why wouldn't any of this modern quote unquote literature promoting LGBT ideology serve similar purposes? It's not the comics themselves that can turn children homosexual, but rather any educational counseling that accompanies it, and how the educator in question describes it to the students. That's what's obscured here. In other words, it's not the comics themselves that are doing it. It's people who take the material from the comics to use it as a way to, to further indoctrinate people by trying to quote unquote normalize it. Um, Also troubling is the citation of anti-sodomy laws. If laws meant to protect victims of sexual violence were struck down by SCOTUS 2 decades ago, isn't that disturbing? Interesting how no comment is made on how the official 1992 confirmation North Star, which characterized as homosexual, occurred in one of the worst stories ever written by Scott Lobdell, whose reputation in comicdom is very poor, which goes to show ideology apparently triumphs merit. Back to the article. By the early 2000s, the CCA became a relic of a bygone era, ignored by publishers and comic sellers alike, which is true. By the early 2010s, the Comics Magazine Association of America was dissolving, and the censorship code along with it. Yes, by 2000, as I think most of us know, by 2011, the CCA was pretty much done. The Comics Code Authority was pretty much done by 2011. The rights to the CCA seal of approval were transferred in 2011 to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit helping to fund censorship battles against authors, publishers, and comic book stores since 1986. If memory serves, the CBLDFs already had its image tainted by former manager Charles Brownstein's sexual misconduct scandals, and for all we know, they haven't given any backing to right-wing creators, so this is equally useless for citation. From the article here, censorship had become a four-letter word to many Americans. Book burnings were seen as extremist, and comic books were in the midst of a popular cultural renaissance. Look how arguments regarding censorship apply selectively, since in the 2 decades since, there's been a regrettable slide back to censorship by the left. And what's got to be a classic example of their being liberal grants them the full right to quote unquote give and take as they see fit. Nobody argues about censorship when it's coming from the left. Just 2 years ago, there was a whole scandal discovered in Canada with book burnings, comics included, all because they were supposedly offensive to Indians. And the ringleader turned out to be a race faker. Canadians, Rick, this is your neck of the woods. Did you hear about this? You're still in the chat? Did you hear about that, Rick, if you're still in the chat? If it could happen across the border up north, it'll be ill-advised to think it couldn't happen again in the USA. And as for Renaissance? Well, it definitely hasn't happened with the mainstream superherodom. Let's see. In from the article, um, the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Notice how they call that murder. Um, in 2020, prompted protests against police brutality and systemic racism, which in turn had led discussions about how racism was taught in schools. Well, in that case, doesn't this make clear comics could be used to teach racism too? If this is Avi answering that point there. Um, if some monster wanted to employ the medium as a means for indoctrination, yet no complaints about all the anti-white incitement that rose following the incident involving a man who turned out to be a criminal. Going back to the article here, those discussions led to fears that quote unquote critical race theory, a college level legal analysis through the lens of race, was being taught in grade schools. Actually, that's what they did seem to be trying to go there, though. A common early concern from groups like Moms for Liberty and Parents Defending Education was that the books were teaching children to hate the police, that America is founded on racism, and that white people should be demonized. In early 2021, those groups began to quote unquote expose school libraries allegedly filled with quote unquote pornographic material that would prime them for sexual abuse and make them believe they were transgender. Notice a paradox in how somebody arguing racism was taught in schools is suggesting nothing similar could be done with the comics and other books in question, serving leftist goals. That's why Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, this is Avi speaking again, had such propaganda banned in schools there, because CRT is a form of racism in itself, which I agree with. The most challenged book in 2021 and 2022 was an autobiographical graphic novel, quote unquote genderqueer, following author and illustrator Maya Kobade's non binary coming of age story, a ban by any other name. For almost 2 years, supporters of the new censorship movement have called out quote unquote genderqueer for pornographic imagery and rebuke critics' accusations that they are slinging out LGBTQ books. The visual medium of comic books makes them often more accessible for readers, but it also means that they are easier to use out of context to rally opposition. While Kobabe, okay, so this is from the news article, mind you, while Kobabe explores the complexities of gender identity, gender neutral pronouns, and sexuality, although frank and vibrant illustrations that some might call, quote, necessary representation, unquote, the new censorship movement deems a few frames as, quote unquote, pornographic. And ignores the rest of the 241 pages. Quote, this book contains obscure sexual activities and sexual nudity, alternate gender ideologies, and profanity, unquote, reads the description on booklooks.org. Framed as an objective rating system for library books. Booklooks has become the favored resource among groups such as Mom for Liberty. While Booklooks website says it is not tied with Moms for Liberty or other organizations, critics and censorship researchers have said the ratings website and and largely conservative groups seem to at least work in tandem. Now back to Avi here, and this is the problem. Why conservatives are entirely invalid? Oh, guess that's what the buffoon's trying to say. Also, if quote unquote non-binary is presented as positive belief system and lifestyle, why shouldn't anybody be concerned? Why shouldn't anybody be concerned and offended that what we have here is a form of self-hatred from one's born gender? After the article here, titles rated a 5 on the website. Book looks worst of the worst material. Gain the rating of having aberrant content, but a book that champions hypermasculinity apparently get a pass. The 5-page inventory of questionable content for Fight Club, which is 10 pages less than Kobabe's book received, also doesn't include multiple instructions for homemade explosives in Palahniuk's book. Just like in the CCA of the 1950s, the new censorship movement is less about analyzing the context of literature and more about promoting a certain group's values. And then Avi asks here, what if it turns out the Fight Club's citation is distorted? Additionally, annoying is how the puff piece attacks what it calls quote-unquote hyper-masculinity without really explaining what they mean and why they think it's bad, which is true. From that statement, all you say is hyper-masculinity. Like, one, they expect to know exactly what you're talking about. So oh, and what about the quote unquote values of the LGBT movement being promoted? And when the article brings up Mark Miller's Superman Red Sun, it says, and this is the article, this is back to the article, Miller's series presents 2 lessons aptly applied to the new censorship movement. The first is a moral lesson. Forcing the world to bend to one's individual ideals means robbing others of their agency, even in the name of protecting those most important to us. Second is a simple reminder to fascists, words are the most dangerous weapon. Yes, but so is censoring words, as the left's been doing of recent. But how is indoctrinating children into transsexual propaganda, or worse, not stripping them of an identity and agency? How's it even protecting them? That's another something the paper is not interested in pondering. The puff piece is one of the biggest disappointments coming from a mainstream media source and demonstrates how leftists are completely unconcerned about the negative effects of these products on children in any way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, this kind of stuff doesn't need to be, aside from basic gender. In other words, aside from biological gender, kids do not need to know anything about sex. They don't need to be seeing pictures of 2 people getting it on, whether it's a heterosexual couple or homosexual couple. They don't need to be they don't need explanation on the whole alphabet agenda. Okay? Kids need to be allowed to be kids. They need to be able to just play with their friends and figure out how to resolve their problem. Not be, So I think Rick. I don't like. I didn't like. I didn't hear about the Canada is pretty big, or at least I don't think I did. So yeah, apparently I guess that these guys were saying there was some kind of book burning over some comics or whatever that were offensive to Indians up in Canada. Rick, that's what was going on. Anyways, so we're already past the hour mark here, so I'm gonna probably I'm gonna go off camera real quick here to just get some more lighting in here. Things are starting to dim down now, so I'll be right. I'm gonna put some music on and then. All right. All right, and I know Rick, you're going to be going off to start your thing soon, so thank you for dropping in and hanging out. Anyway, so we're going to start to wrap things up here. Now we're going to go over, do a little quick wrestling wrap up here. There are some little bits of news from like WWE and AEW. So we'll go over those real quick. So, of course, on last night's Raw, AJ Styles went over from SmackDown to Raw to congratulate Seth Rollins on his world title victory, and then they were put into a tag team match against. They were put into a tag team match against Finn Balor and Damian Priest of the Judgment Day with Dominic Mysterio and Rhea Ripley in their corner. AJ and Seth beat Judgment Day tandem. Also, apparently, Seth Rollins did a very interesting thing. He went up and put his arm around Rhea Ripley. Now, Rollins is a kind of a tweener to a face right now. Ripley's a heel. But and it did get some no, not actually, that's something I was just thinking about, but it was a repeat of something that Shawn Michaels did with Melina back a few years ago. Shinsuke Nakamura advanced to the Money in the Bank by defeating Bronson Reed. Dolph Ziggler and JD McDonough had a double countout. They crowned new WWE Women's Tag Team Champion last night and put it, with Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey winning the titles. Ricochet also advanced into the Money in the Bank, defeating The Miz. So that was all going on last night. And also, it was also recently, a couple of pregnancies were announced today. It was announced that Alexa Bliss is pregnant now, and that's why she's been off TV. I believe that's why she's been off TV, and will probably be off TV for the next few months. And I think I may have mentioned this the other day, but it would appear that Sammy Guevara and Ty Mallow are expecting their first child now in AEW. So congratulations on both situations there. Speaking of AEW, of course, as mentioned, Chris Statlander made her return and defeated Jade Cargill for the TBS title. It is believed that Jade Cargill will be off TV for a while. In other AEW news, hey Woody, wrestling baby, yep, yeah. In other AEW news, I was right about this. So apparently Jamie Hayter had been dealing with some back issues, some back injuries, and that's why they ended up having to take the AEW women's title off of her so she could get some rest and deal with that. Toni Storm won the women's championship on Sunday. So that's pretty much all the wrestling news I got for you guys right now. There is still some skirmishes that Vince McMahon may be exercising some influence on some of the TV shows. Other than that, we're gonna go ahead and and tomorrow night's Dynamite. I think there is at least one match already announced for Dynamite tomorrow night already for tomorrow night's, which will be happening in San Diego, the Viejas Arena in San Diego. Let's see. It's already announced for tomorrow night's Dynamite in San Diego at the Viejas Arena. Chris Jericho teams with Saraya to take on Adam Cole and Dr. Britt Baker. So that's going to be, and it was also announced on the buy-in show for AEW on Sunday night that they will be kicking off this year's Owen Hart tournament. Last year, of course, Cole and Baker won last year's tournament. So they'll be kicking off that tournament this year as well. So with that, let's go ahead, and today being Tuesday, May 30th, 2023, let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. 1995, 1973, and 2003. Okay, so with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So first off, on this day in Nietzsche history, heading back to 1973. On this day back in 1973, 50 years ago today, Haystack Calhoun and Tony Gurria would defeat Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka for the WWF Tag Team Championships. So on this date back in 1973, 50 years ago today, Haystack Calhoun and Tony Gurria would defeat Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka for the WWF Tag Team. As I understand it, the only one of those four men who's still alive to this day is Tony Gurria. He's still alive, but the other three have died since that time. So, anyways, 50 years ago today, Tony Gurria and Haystack Calhoun win the WWF Tag Team Championships. Woody. Haha Haystacks was on the circuit in the AWA. I saw as a kid. Yeah, he's a big guy too. I know he died actually kind of young due in large part to issues surrounding his weight too. So, anyways, moving on to the next piece of Nietzsche history. Moving on to 1995, which is 28 years ago today, I believe. On this date, 28 years ago in 1995, the first issue of Batman Chronicles went on sale on this date. It seemed to be a quarterly anthology, I guess. 48 pages, $2.96. You had 2 Batman features and an Anarchy feature. So on this date in 1995, 28 years, first issue of Batman Chronicles went on sale on this date in 1995. So there we go on that one. And then, finally, the final piece of niche history tonight. On this date 20 years ago, in 2003, on this day in 2003, Walt Disney Pictures' Finding Nemo made its widespread United States. Finding Nemo would make its widespread United States debut after debuting almost 2 weeks prior in Los Angeles. On this date, 20 years ago today, Walt Disney Pictures' Finding Nemo would make its widespread United States debut. So with that, guys, I thank you for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight. Did talk about quite a few things, some controversial stuff, but so with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. And don't forget, of course, this Friday I'll have Terry from Mighty Geek Studios on as my co-host. We look back to comics that went on sale in October 1939. This week we'll be focusing on quality comics, on Smash Comics Volume 1, Issue 5, and Feature Comics Volume 1, Issue 27. Now, technically, Feature Comics Volume 1, Issue number 27, technically went on sale in November, but so did number 28. So that's why we're covering 27 as part of the October coverage, as there are only 2 books they were publishing at the time. So, your fro is looking good. All right, well, thanks. Anyways, guys, I thank you guys for being here, and I hope to see you all. But hey, Rex, you got here right at the end. I'm just about to wrap up. Hopefully, you'll go back and watch the replay. And thank you guys again for all the likes and shares, of course. Thank you for dropping in, Rex. But anyways, I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Now don't forget, Monday through Friday we're on from 6 we're on at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. That's 8 Central, of course. So I hope you guys will be back here tomorrow. Bye.